So some of you have asked for a video on how we make these bowls, and so I thought I'd give it a shot and see if we could make one that it's pretty straightforward. The technique is easy. We mix up some resin and we let the resin sit to thicken up so that when we pour it, it doesn't run off the surface. We're going to be using this brand of resin called Tabletop. I think we picked it up at Home Depot. The way the resin mixes is it's a 1-to-1 ratio, so we use a cup that has a whole bunch of different scales on it. We'll be using this scale where we mix the resin in a volume of a 1-to-1 ratio with the hardener. So on the side there, this scale right here, 1-to-1. I'm going to be mixing enough to fill these 3 cups here on the side. It doesn't take very much resin to make these bowls. So I'm going to stop at the 4 line, which is 4 ounces. Plus 4 ounces will be a total of 8 ounces. We'll have some resin left over, but Susie never seems to have a problem coming up with a reason to use extra resin. I've chosen 3 colors for this pour, a blue and a green, kind of an earthy feel. These pigments are made by a company called Pearlex. We have emerald and sapphire blue. And then we'll add some white highlights to give the illusion or feel of clouds. This particular resin needs to be mixed for about 3 minutes. I'll do this for about 2 minutes and then do the last minute or so after we mix in the pigments. So a large batch of clear. So what I have here that I didn't mention earlier is this blue silicone mat is what we're going to be pouring onto. Silicone is a material that the resin doesn't stick to, and we'll be pouring the resin in the shape of a circle to fit over ultimately this form that we're going to use, and we'll drape it over. The reason this form is good is because it's a fairly small base, and then it has a lot of height to allow us to hang the bowl upside down. If you're not following, you'll see in a second, but it allows us to have a nice high side without it being spread out. So that's about 2 minutes. We did a little time lapse there. The first thing I'm going to do is get the small hair out of there. Equally distribute, or mostly equally distribute, the resin among the 3 cups. A little less for the white, since the white is more of a highlight than a base color. I'm also going to be adding some chipped stone for some texture. I'll show you that in a second. I need about half as much for the white. Okay. Put this aside in case we need it. So the music you hear in the background is our dryer telling us it's done. So much for our Disney-like production values. This pigment is mica based, and so it can be quite dusty. So it's best to gently stir it in the beginning until it incorporates into the resin. There we go. So there's that mixture. It's hard to say how much you really need in the way of pigment. We do want the bowls to not be transparent, so a little more than less. But I would say a scoop and a half on an ice cream stick is plenty. Again, gently to start. Just kind of roll it over so you don't get a lot of dust kicking up. There we go. And lastly, the white. Maybe just one scoop here because it's not as much. Move these to the side. Mix that up. This resin is fairly viscous or thick compared to some others, which is good. Less likely to flow off the side of the mat. Okay, I'll put that aside for a second. So these are the stones that we're going to be using. Got these at Michael's. Again, they provide a bit of a visual texture. Using the form as a reference, I'm going to spread these out a little bit more. A little more evenly. There we go. Actually, that's the bottom, and that's pretty good. Okay. So the colors and the patterns that you choose are all your own. Just gonna give it a good mix one more time. See how nice and thick this is. Pouring it in this circle helps it to spread in a nice circle. Now the white. I'll use the white both for maybe a highlight around the edge. And then a couple of streaks. Okay. And if you're wondering, oh, I don't like the way that looks, just Wait a second. We put the heat to it. Not only will the heat help to remove any air bubbles, but it will create a neat, almost nebula effect to blend it. Okay, so there's our pattern. This heat gun that I use is made by DeWalt. It has a temperature gauge on the back, and we can get it to about 1,000 degrees. See, it's at 500 right now. There we go. So you can see the air bubbles pretty much just disappearing from the surface. Hopefully you can see that. And as I get a little closer, I start blending it. So there we go. You notice that it starts to take on a bit of a freeform appearance. I'm just going to do one thing here, and that is to get it to behave a little bit. Just make this a little higher so it doesn't go much further than that and that. And that's that. And so now we wait about 2 hours for the resin to harden enough that we can then drape it over our form so that we can begin to take the shape of the bowl. So we'll come back for that in a little bit. So it's been about 24 hours since the resin was placed over the mold. It has firmed up nicely, and we're going to now remove the silicone from the inside. See how easy this comes off. And there you have our bowl. I had a little bit of slumping and dripping on the back from some of the resin. I can trim that, sand it a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is just touch it with some clear resin, just like I'm going to do to the inside of the bowl. If you notice, the inside has a kind of a matte finish to it as a result of being in contact with the silicone, whereas the outside is nice and shiny. And look at that pattern. Really pretty cool. And that's that. So this has a unique shape to it. It's kind of tall, got a nice solid round base, and it'll look great once we touch it up with some clear resin. So I hope that teaches you how we do it.